I have genuinely not prepared anything to say. Usually I have notes on my phone, or usually I have notes on a notepad. I made no notes. I was just like, oh, I have some free time today because I've had the last 2 days off. And I was like, why not sit down and film a little bit? I keep like readjusting the camera. So we moved into this new apartment, and I had originally set up the camera over by the window, and the lighting was just kind of off. I sat it like facing my bed, even though I don't have a bed at the moment. I'm sleeping on a blow-up mattress. But anyways, I have not sat down in front of a camera in, oh gosh, months. I really think that the last time I filmed anything, it was August or September of last year, and it's now February. Like, today is February 23rd, so it's almost March, and I haven't filmed at all. I really don't have anything prepared that I wanted to say. I really just wanted to sit down and just kind of chat because I haven't done that in a while. So I don't have like a set list of things that I'm gonna go over, but I really just wanted to talk about my DCP experience in general, what I'm up to now, where I've been, because it's been a long time and I know that I disappeared from social media for a hot minute. So I really just wanted to talk about all of that, and we're just gonna kind of wing it because I don't have notes. I'm just gonna kind of start talking, I guess. I got accepted a year ago. Was it a year ago yesterday, or a year ago 2 days ago? Something like that. I think it was a year ago 2 days ago is when I got accepted. And because it just popped up in my Snapchat memories. Didn't start my DCP until June 20th of last year. So June 20th of 2022. And that was my arrival date. That was my move-in date. That was the day that I, you know, moved into Flamingo, all of that jazz. And I will say move-in day was a lot. It was a lot. And it's very overwhelming, especially if you've never done anything like that before. And like for me, I went to college at home, so I didn't have that experience of like having any type of move-in day before this. It was incredibly overwhelming, and I knew going into it that I get like that, and I get really like anxious in those kind of situations, and I get really overwhelmed really easily. So I knew going into it that it was going to be a very overwhelming day, but it was a very overwhelming day. I managed to get everything done that day. I made no Target trips because I had bought everything in advance. Because I drove down my car. Fortunately, I was able to pack everything in my car and get it to Flamingo that way. But fortunately, I had my family there. They helped me. It was the first time that I had hung out with Mars, so it was the first time that we were getting to talk to each other. On top of that, meeting my other 2 roommates. The move-in day, a lot happened that day, and I can't express to you enough, like if you're somebody like me and you get overwhelmed really easily, go into it with that mindset of like preparing yourself and knowing that you're gonna get overwhelmed. And it really helps a lot. But I got most everything done because I didn't make any Target trips because I had everything. So I spent the entire day unpacking, putting my bed together, hanging up stuff on my wall. And I was put in a 2x2. If you haven't seen any of my videos in the past, or you haven't seen my Instagram or anything like that, I was in a 2x2 with Marissa. So I managed to get everything done, like including like kitchen stuff and living room stuff that day. The rest of the week was kind of just fun. You don't have your self-admission pass at that point, so that's whatever I would do. Resort hopping. We went to I went to Universal with my family before saying goodbye. We did go grocery shopping that week. Me and Marissa did. So Traditions was then that Friday. Traditions, because move-in is on Monday, Traditions was on Friday. Sometimes it's on Saturdays, but for us it was on Friday. And they split up Traditions in half. So like, I believe that how they did it in the past was they had, oh gosh, what's it called? It's Traditions, and then the second class, oh my gosh, it has a name. I can't think of what it's called. But in the past, they would do both of those in one day. And so when people would talk about Traditions being an all-day experience, they're talking about both of those classes. Because you do Traditions in the morning, then you'd have a lunch break, and then you do, oh my, it'll come to me at some point. But there's a second class, and I can't remember what it's called, but they would do that in the afternoon. But ours is split into 2 days. So we did Traditions in the morning on Friday, and then we had the rest of the day. And then we did the second class Saturday morning, and then we had the rest of the day. I had my festival specifics class on Sunday, and then I was off on Monday. I think Sunday was my festival specifics, then I was off on Monday and Tuesday. I could be completely wrong, but I know that out of all 4 of my roommates, I was the one that started training after everybody. Like I had a day or 2 off before they started. And it really just varies on your role, your location, everything like that, on how soon you start training. So training was beautiful. Festival specifics being on that Sunday, I went into it by myself because I didn't know any other people who were in festivals at the time, like that were my arrival date, that are doing this training at the same time. I didn't know anybody. All aspects of that class got me so excited to work at Epcot, like so excited, because if you know me, I'm an Epcot girl, and like that's my park, that's my place. When I got Epcot Festivals as my role, I really wasn't super excited. Like I was excited for it because I loved the idea of working at Epcot. But I wasn't excited in the sense of like, I felt like everybody was getting that, and I was like, I don't really want to do the role that everybody's doing. And I went into it and I had heard so many mixed things. Or like when people were asking me like, oh, so what are you going to be doing? And I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be working at Epcot Festivals. And I would get so many mixed reviews. Either like you absolutely loved it and it was your favorite thing ever, or you absolutely hated it. And I was like, I just know with my luck, something's going to happen and I'm going to hate it. Like, I was thinking worst case scenario, and I'm trying to look on the bright side, and I'm like, you know, I can pick up at other locations, like if it's that bad, like I can do other things. But I went into it and I was so terrified because I had heard so many mixed things, and like I had heard more people hate it than love it. And I was like, at the time, and I was like, oh my gosh, like what have I gotten myself into? At the time that I applied, we did not get a say in our role. The only role that we got a say in was lifeguarding, but that was it. Like, so I was assigned food service, very random. I was assigned Epcot Festivals, very random. I'm almost positive I started training on Wednesday, because I think that I trained Wednesday, Thursday, was off on Friday. Saturday was my first day without a trainer, like my first day on my own. And then I immediately got deployed. So my first 2 days of festivals training, I cannot express how much I fell in love with this job. At this point, I didn't even know anybody. There was one other guy in my training group. Like it was just me and him, that was it. I fell in love with it. And the first thing that we did was like, we got our costumes and everything. And then he was like, okay, my trainer, he was like, all right, so we're gonna start out on register. I've never worked food service before. I've never worked merchandise. I've never worked anything that has to do with any type of register ever. So when he said that we were starting out with that, I was terrified. I was petrified because I was like, oh my gosh, this is just gonna be the world's most complicated thing. What am I doing? But I watched him do it several times. And the guests that day were just so nice, so understanding. They were like, oh, it's the little earning your ears thing. And then I would explain to them that it was my first day of training and that some of them were my very first guests that I was helping, and they were just all super sweet. And you get that a lot at Epcot. Like overall, I have gotten some of my best guest experiences at Epcot. The second half of training day is when we took our little loop around the World Showcase and we got our little backstage tour, and that was really nice. The next day was closing, so we were at a completely different booth and we were learning how to close, and I had two of the best trainers ever. And we got done with the second day of training and I looked at my trainer and I was like, so when do I take this off? Like my little earning my ears, when do I take it off? And she was like, oh, so technically you can take it off now. And I was freaking out because I was like, I've only had 2 days of training, what do you mean? And she was like, but I tell most people, take it off whenever you're ready. So I worked one more shift with it because I was like, I need to make sure that I know what I'm doing and everything. Well, I was off the next day. I can't remember what I did that day. Oh my gosh, I think I went to the parks that day because we had gotten, my first day of training was the day that we got our main gates in. So I'm almost positive that I went to the parks that day. I had to have. Saturday was my first day working without a trainer. It was terrifying, but the people that I was working with that day were just so sweet, so nice, and a good portion, like I would say about 80% of the people running, because at the time it was Flower and Garden, and even into Food and Wine, about 80% to 85% were all CPs. So like we were all on the same level with each other, and there was no, we were all on the same wavelength, and we all lived at Flamingo, and it was like, and I think that was another reason why I loved it so much. After that first day without a trainer, I was immediately deployed because that is the gap in between Flower and Garden and Food and Wine, and they deployed almost everybody that was working festivals to other locations for the time being until Food and Wine would start back up. And I got Pop Century. I was genuinely excited about it. Working at the parks versus working at the resorts are two completely different things. Every single experience of the DCP is different. It's two completely different things. They have two completely different sets of leadership and like their own priorities, and like what I was trained on for the parks, some of it didn't really necessarily carry over to the resorts, and it was a lot of adjustment. But I was only there for 2 weeks, and then Food and Wine started back up. Let me tell you, I've said this so many times, but I loved my job. Like I loved my job. There is not one thing that I would change about working at Epcot festivals. And I cannot express enough how much I loved this job. When Food and Wine started out, my schedule, I was only getting about 6 hours every day, which is nothing. But it was because we had so many people, because they had pulled hundreds of CPs to work Food and Wine. For about the first month or so, we only had a portion of the booths open, and then the rest of them were gonna open up in August. So to get us all like the right amount of hours and stuff, I was just working 6 hours a day for 5 days in a row, which is absolutely nothing. It gave me a really, really good chance to meet everybody that I was working with. For Food and Wine, for just the CPs, we were assigned to specific zones. There was red zone, yellow zone, and blue zone, and my zone was blue zone. If you've been to the festival and you've experienced it before, it consisted of Fry Basket, the Odyssey building, Saucy Swanky Swine. It was the ones that were by Test Track, or the ones that were by Port of Entry, like Creations, Connections, like that section of Epcot, that was my section. The part-time and full-time could go wherever, but it was the CPs that were specifically zoned, which turned out to be such a good thing, because then we were stuck with the same group of people, but there were so many of us that we got to know so many other people, and we got to know every single person that we were working with. Even though there were so many of us, we got to know everybody, and that just, it made things honestly 10 times easier. At the beginning of the festival, I was only getting 6 hours a day, and I was always getting the closing shifts. And that was kind of just divided up kind of randomly. Like, there were friends of mine that I had that were doing, like, they were in the same position as me, but they were getting all of the morning shifts, so they were getting like 10 to 4, and then I would be getting 4 to 10. And it was just kind of randomized on how they were doing that, but pretty much for the first month, I was working 3 to 9 and 4 to 10 every single day, until it was like the middle of August that our second batch of booths opened. So that was Mac and Eats, Coastal Eats, and Noodle Exchange. So then that dispersed us even more. So then I was getting more hours, and I was getting like 8-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts, stuff like that. I loved my job so much. We had such an incredible group of people, and I can't express that enough. We were incredibly lucky to have the CPs that we did. The coordinators were incredible. The leaders were incredible. Everybody knew each other, and everybody had each other's back. For the first like 3 months of my DCP, and I'm not at all over exaggerating, I'm being 100% honest, I was going to the parks on all of my off days. Like, I feel like every video that you watch, it's always like, oh, well, like, don't expect to go on all of your off days because, you know, like, you're gonna be tired. And this is true. This is true. But I went to the parks on every single one of my off days. Like, as soon as the schedule would drop, I would immediately check to see what my off days were, and I would book a park reservation. And sometimes I wouldn't even go to that park. Sometimes I would go do mini golf. I would go to Universal. But I was always doing something. Always. On all of my off days, I was doing something. And that lasted up until about September. And I'm not exaggerating. Every one of my off days, I was doing something. And yes, I would get tired, or like I would get worn down. But at the end of the day, I loved it. And like, I love working for Disney, and I love going to the parks, and I love like taking advantage of my perks as a cast member. About the middle of September, it was September 22nd, because it was the day after September 21st, and I remember going into work that day. I think I had a 10.5-hour shift. It was a really long shift, but it was at Brewing, which was my favorite to work. But I just remember that day, it was my first bad day at work. It was my first day that I was just really like, you know, I love my job and I love the people that I'm working with, but everybody's gonna have their bad days at work. And that was my first real not good day. Things going on in my personal life, things going on while I was at work, things going on at work, just, you know, just a typical bad day at work. Driving home that night, I received news that my family had to put my dog down from home. It wasn't expected. If you go back to like my packing video or my moving to Florida video, he's in it. It was Kylo. He was my white German Shepherd. We had him for 6 years. That kind of stuff is so rare, and you never think that it's gonna happen to you. And like, it's hard to explain to somebody who doesn't have pets that it's not just a pet. Like, having a pet is having another member of your family. Like, you have that connection with them, you have that bond with them. It's not just an animal in your house. Like, there is that connection there, and it's hard to explain to somebody that doesn't have a dog, doesn't have like anything like that, that it's not just as simple as losing an animal. Like, you're losing a part of yourself in that, and that really took a toll on me. You don't ever expect that stuff to happen, but especially when I live 14.5 hours away, and unfortunately I have the best leaders. They were able to give me the next day off so that way I could just kind of recuperate and gather myself, and then I did go to work the next day. And that was when I started to take a step back from social media, just to take a little minor break. So I took a little, what was just gonna be for a little bit, break from Instagram, and it ended up turning into about 3 months. And that was not all Kylo. Just be careful who you surround yourself with. Be careful who you let into your circle. And I'm not at all saying that, like, I made some of the best friends on my DCP. There are times that I don't think I was surrounding myself with the best group of people. And at the end of the day, it just wore me down. I have so many YouTube videos that I need to edit because it just got to the point where I didn't have the desire to. I didn't have the desire to do the things that I used to enjoy. It eventually got to the point where I didn't have the desire to go to work. I didn't have the desire to go to the parks on my off days. I didn't have the desire to really go out and do anything. I got really, really into a bad state mentally. And I feel like that's not talked about enough, that the DCP is hard. And about December, it got to the point where it was just, I didn't know what I was gonna do anymore. Because I had made the decision back, I had really made the decision really, really early on that I wanted to go part-time, full-time. I did not want to extend my program. I wanted to just get straight in with the company. Got accepted for full-time. And of course I accepted that. And I didn't know where I was gonna be at that point, because when Food and Wine ended in November, it ended November 19th. That was my last day of festivals. Because the next festival was so much smaller, they had to get rid of almost all of us and put us somewhere else within the company. We all stayed food service. We just went to different quick service locations. And I loved my job so much. And so that took a toll on me when I found out. It was about the end of October, I think, that I found out that I wasn't going to be staying festivals, because I did know some people that were. So having my last day of festivals, that was a very, very emotional day. And it was, in a way, it was kind of like, it was almost like my program was ending early is what it felt like. Like, it wasn't, but it's what it felt like, because then flash forward to a month and a half later when my program did end, it's like I wasn't even sad because I had already had my sad moment back in November of like saying goodbye to everybody that I was working with, because we were all going separate ways. And it's like, yeah, we're still on the DCP, but we're all going in completely separate ways with the company, and we're not going to be coming into work every day with each other anymore. There was that, and then I found out that I was getting deployed to Sunset Boulevard. Going into it, I had only heard good things. Like, I had not heard anybody, because I knew people that were deployed there. Like, at the time I was deployed to Pop Century, there were friends of mine who were deployed to Sunset Boulevard, and I had heard nothing but good things. It's where I currently am. It's not bad at all, but festivals and any other quick service location in Disney are two completely different things. I just really, I miss working at Epcot. That's the extent of it. Like, I miss working at my home park, and I'm so incredibly grateful to still be working for Disney, and I am so incredibly grateful to still be working in a park. Like, it's just, but leaving festivals was very hard, because that I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. That was in November. It was different. It wasn't bad, it was just different than what I was used to. But that's where I currently am, because surprise, when my program ended, I went full-time. I'm now a full-time Disney cast member working at Sunset Boulevard. I mean, I love it. Like, I love working for the company. December, I really struggled. I picked my departure date January 26th. I did not realize that most everybody was leaving January 6th, January 5th. So then it was like, in my mind, I still had about a month left of my program, but I only had it with about 1 or 2 people, because everybody else was leaving on January 5th. Struggled so much, but at the same time, I was like, I know that once I get through this and get through the saying goodbye to everybody, that I will do so much better. But the process of getting through that was really hard, because I hate change. I struggled with change so much. When they left, coming home to Flamingo made me so sad that it motivated me enough to finally look for an apartment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jocelyn, your program ended in 3 weeks. Why were you not looking for apartments sooner? And I was, but I was not looking seriously. So I sat down that night and I spent the entire night just scouring the internet to try to find places, because I was like, I move out in 3 weeks. I have to have a place to live, because I'm going full-time. Like, when my program ends, I'm not going home. We moved in a week ago tomorrow, so it's only been 6 days at this point. So as of right now, I'm a full-time cast member. I am working food service at Sunset Boulevard. First of all, I am in so much of a better state mentally than I was a month from now, even. The DCP is hard. I recommend it to everybody. It's just, like, there's so many of my life experiences that I don't think I would have had without it. I recommend it to everybody, but it is hard. So I really, really, really do recommend it for everybody. I think that it is good for your soul. I think that it is, it's definitely an experience. I absolutely loved my college program. Like, truly, truly loved my college program. Now, my biggest piece of advice about going into the college program, go into it with no expectations. I'm not talking low expectations. I'm talking no expectations. Do not compare your college program experience to anybody, ever. Because your program is your program. It is your experience. It is what you make of it. Like, it is your experience that you get to have, and it's unique to you. I'm sharing my experience just to share it, to give you an idea of what I went through, and you will not have the same experience that I did. Every single person has such a different and such a unique experience with the college program. Do not ever compare it to anybody else. And that, I think, is one of the most beautiful things about the program, is that if you go into it not comparing it to anybody, not comparing it to anything that you've seen, and you have these little like tidbits in your head of like what you think that it might be like, because like, you know, you've heard stories here and there. If you go into it with that mindset, you will have such an amazing experience. So at the end of the day, I absolutely loved my program. So much so that I am now full-time. The position that I'm in right now, I have dreamed about for years and years and years. I am so incredibly grateful to be here. I am so thankful that this is what I get to do, and I am in such a better state than I was 2 months ago. Like, it will all work out at the end of the day, and I know that that's so cheesy, and I know that everybody says that, but it's so true. But you have to work for yourself. Like, you have to work for it. I really hope that I didn't forget anything, but I do plan on doing more videos. I plan on, well, oh my gosh, I have like 3 or 4, no, oh my gosh, I have like 5 that I need to upload that are from during my DCP that I just, oh my gosh, I have so many. I have multiple videos that I have planned, like sit down kind of like this, but overall, I loved my program. And I love where I am right now. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me in some way, shape, or form, and I will try to help you as best I can. I feel like nobody talks about how hard the DCP is. I feel like you don't get to hear a whole lot of somebody who had a rough DCP but chose to stay. At the end of the day, like, I loved my program and I wouldn't change that for anything. I hope this video made somewhat sense. I hope that you are encouraged to do the DCP, because I did not make this video to deter anybody, because I loved my program. Absolutely loved my program, and I would recommend it to everybody. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed, and I will try to do this a little bit more often. Hope you all have a really good day.